The cafe smelled like burnt espresso and fresh rain. Daniel noticed the rain first because it never asked permission. It followed people inside on their shoes, darkening the pale floor in soft, uneven shapes. It clung to coats and slipped from umbrella tips, tapping quietly against chair legs as if trying to be noticed. He noticed the smell second because coffee always carried memory with it, and memory was something he handled carefully now. There had been a time when coffee meant mornings that started together. 2 mugs on the counter. A voice asking if you wanted sugar, a kiss pressed into routine without ceremony. Now there was only 1 mug at home, chipped at the rim, functional enough. Daniel sat alone at a small round table near the window, shoulders slightly hunched, hands wrapped around a cup he hadn't finished. His phone lay face down beside it. He'd learned that trick early. If the screen was hidden, it couldn't call him back into the world. Silence was easier when it was chosen. Outside, traffic crawled through the rain, headlights stretching into pale reflections on the road. Inside, the cafe breathed softly. Overlapping conversations, the scrape of chairs, the hiss of the espresso machine like a living thing that never slept. Daniel wasn't lonely in the dramatic sense. He didn't ache for company. He didn't feel abandoned. He was simply worn thin. The kind of tired that settled into posture. The kind that made a man sit carefully, as if conserving energy for something important, later something that might never arrive. Every other chair in the cafe was taken. Couples leaned toward each other. Friends laughed too loudly. A student occupied a corner table with books spread wide like wings. Daniel hadn't chosen solitude. It had chosen him, quietly and without cruelty, the way weather chooses a season. He stared through the fogged window, watching rain blur the world into something softer, less sharp around the edges. Then a voice cut gently through the weight pressing on his chest. "Can I share this table?" It wasn't loud, it wasn't apologetic. It simply existed. Daniel looked up. A young woman stood beside him, balancing a tray against her hip. Rain had darkened her jacket, deepening its color. Her hair was pulled loosely back, strands escaping near her face. One leg ended above the knee. The other stood steady. A crutch rested easily against her arm, not something she leaned on heavily, not something she hid. She wasn't framed by hesitation. She met his eyes directly, calmly, as if asking the question was the most natural thing in the world. "Everywhere else is full," she added, her voice kind but not pleading. Daniel rose halfway from his chair before he realized he was moving. A reflex, an instinct to make space. "Yes, of course," he said quickly, embarrassed by the motion. "Please," she smiled, quick and polite, not relieved, not overly grateful, just appreciative. "Thank you." She maneuvered with practiced ease, setting her tray down, adjusting the crutch, and taking the seat across from him. The movement was smooth, unself-conscious. Daniel noticed because his mind noticed everything now, but he also noticed that she noticed nothing about his noticing. That mattered. "I'm Mara," she said, setting her tea down. "Daniel." The introductions were simple, no explanation followed. None was needed. For a moment, they sat in silence, not awkward, not strained, just shared. The empty chair between them was gone, replaced by presence. Mara wrapped her hands around her cup, steam curling upward. "It always smells like rain in here," she said, glancing toward the window. "Even when it's not raining." Daniel nodded. "Like the walls, remember?" She smiled at that. A thoughtful smile. He took a sip of his coffee. It was still too hot, but he didn't mind. The heat anchored him in his body, in the moment. Outside, a bus hissed to a stop. Someone laughed too loudly near the counter. Life continued, indifferent but steady. "You waiting for someone?" Mara asked gently. "My daughter," Daniel said without thinking. The word came easily, warmly. "Art class?" "Just around the corner." Mara's expression softened, not dramatically, just enough to register understanding. "That explains the tired," she said lightly. He let out a quiet breath that was almost a laugh. "I guess it does." They didn't rush the conversation. They let it grow where it wanted to. Mara spoke about the library where she worked, how she liked the order of books, the way stories waited patiently instead of demanding attention. Daniel listened, truly listened, the way he rarely did anymore. It felt good to give someone his focus without needing to protect it. He noticed how she spoke with her hands, expressive but controlled, How her confidence didn't ask to be admired. How she didn't fill silence out of fear of it. He noticed, too, the occasional glances from others, quick looks that darted to her leg and away. He felt a flicker of irritation on her behalf, then noticed that she remained untouched by it. Grounded, secure. When Daniel checked his watch, the time startled him. "I should go," he said, regret threading his voice before he could stop it. "Class ends soon?" "Of course," Mara said easily. He stood, then hesitated. The old instinct to leave things as they were, unaltered, rose up inside him. But something quieter pushed back. "Would you—" He stopped, searching for the right shape of words. "Would you like to get coffee again sometime?" Her eyebrows lifted, surprised but pleased. "I'd like that." The simplicity of her answer felt like a gift. They exchanged numbers, no ceremony, no promises. As Daniel stepped back into the rain, he felt lighter than he had when he'd entered. Not because something had been fixed, but because something had shifted. Behind him, through the fogged glass, Mara lifted her cup and took another sip, unhurried, exactly where she belonged. The empty chair remained empty, but it no longer felt lonely. They spoke the way strangers do when neither wants to scare away a rare calm, carefully, honestly, without the need to impress. Outside, rain stitched silver lines down the cafe window, blurring the city into something softer. Inside, the air held warmth and a quiet rhythm. The espresso machine hissed intermittently, cups clinked, chairs scraped gently against the floor. The cafe felt alive but unintrusive, as if it understood when to step back. Mara cradled her mug of chamomile tea, her fingers relaxed around the porcelain. Daniel took another sip of his coffee and winced, the heat biting his tongue. He swallowed it anyway, refusing to react. Some habits were hard to break, especially the habit of minimizing his own discomfort. Mara noticed. "That was too hot," she said, not teasing, simply observant. He smiled faintly. "It'll cool," she accepted the answer without comment. "You waiting for someone?" she asked, her gaze drifting briefly toward the window. "My daughter?" Daniel said. The word came easily, warm with meaning. "Art class." Just around the corner, Mara's expression softened, subtle but sincere. "Single dad?" He hesitated only a moment before answering. "Widower," the word landed gently between them, heavy but not dramatic. He'd learned how to say it without bracing himself. "I'm sorry," she said. 2 words, no rush to fill the space. No pity layered into her tone. Just understanding, offered and left alone. "Thank you," Daniel replied, nodding once. They sat quietly for a breath, the moment respected rather than rushed past. Outside, a car splashed through a puddle, the sound muffled by the glass. Mara broke the silence easily. "I work at the library," she said, "mostly afternoons. I like the quiet order of it. Books make sense to me," Daniel smiled. "They wait for you." "Exactly," she said, pleased. "They don't demand attention. They just exist until you're ready." He thought about that. How different it was from the way life felt now. Always pulling, always needing. "I read to my daughter every night," he said. "She insists on it. What is she like?" "Whales?" he answered without hesitation. "Anything with whales. And stories where girls are brave in quiet ways." Mara's eyes lit slightly. "She sounds thoughtful." "She is," he said. "She wears mismatched socks on purpose. Says the world already matches too much." Mara laughed softly, genuine and unguarded. "I like her already." Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. It surprised him how much that meant. As they talked, he became aware of details, the way Mara shifted in her chair, naturally adjusting without drawing attention. The ease with which she leaned her crutch against the table leg. Her movements weren't careful. They were confident, familiar. He also noticed the glances from others. Curious looks that flicked toward her leg, then away. People thinking they were discreet. Mara didn't acknowledge them. Not once. Her focus stayed where it belonged, on the conversation, on him. Daniel realized something then. She trusted her body. Not because it was perfect, but because it was hers. That kind of trust was rare. "I don't usually come out like this," Daniel admitted after a while. "I mean alone." Mara tilted her head slightly. "But you did today." "Yes," he said. "I had an hour. Sometimes that's all it takes," she replied. "An hour that doesn't belong to anyone else." The rain softened outside, thinning into mist. Light shifted, growing brighter near the window. Daniel checked his watch and felt the disappointment immediately, sharp and unexpected. "I should go," he said. "Art class ends soon," Mara nodded, accepting the moment without resistance. "Of course." He stood, slipping his jacket on. The weight of routine settled back onto his shoulders, but something underneath it had changed. He hesitated. The old instinct urged him to leave it there. A pleasant interaction, nothing complicated, nothing risky. But another voice, quieter, steadier, pushed forward. "Would you like to get coffee again sometime?" He asked, the words leaving his mouth before fear could intercept them. Mara blinked, then smiled. This one reached her eyes. "I'd like that." Relief washed through him, warm and grounding. They exchanged numbers with the casual seriousness of people who understood the value of intention. No promises, no expectations, just openness. As Daniel stepped outside, the rain had nearly stopped. The city looked freshly rinsed, its edges clearer. Behind him, through the glass, Mara lifted her cup again, unhurried, entirely herself. Daniel walked toward the art studio, phone warm in his pocket, his heart lighter than it had been when he arrived. Quiet courage, he realized, didn't announce itself. Sometimes it sounded like a simple question. Sometimes it looked like staying present. And sometimes it felt like choosing not to walk away. Sometimes it tasted like coffee that was a little too hot but worth it anyway. Their next meeting wasn't really a date. Daniel had been clear about that from the start, not because Mara needed the explanation, but because he did. He needed to remind himself. Some parts of his life you couldn't just step into casually. They had to be entered with care. So, instead of a restaurant, they walked in the park. It was late afternoon and the light stretched long and golden across the grass. The trees stood in loose, quiet rows, their leaves whispering softly above them. And between them walked Lily, swinging their hands back and forth like a little pendulum. Her steps were light but purposeful. "This is my favorite part," she announced, giving a small skip. "When the ducks come out." Mara smiled down at her, a genuine, easy smile. "Do they know you?" she asked. "Maybe," Lily said, her expression very serious. "I feed them sometimes." From a few steps behind, Daniel watched them. He felt his heart settling into a slow, cautious rhythm. He was aware of everything, the way Lily leaned naturally toward Mara, almost unconsciously. The way Mara, without even seeming to think about it, adjusted her own pace to match Lily's shorter stride. Nothing about it felt forced. It was just happening. They reached a bench near the pond, where a small flotilla of ducks was already gathering at the edge, anticipating a handout. Lily let go of their hands and crouched down to watch them, completely absorbed. And Mara, in one smooth motion, knelt right beside her, lowering herself to Lily's eye level without any hesitation or spectacle. It wasn't a performance for his benefit. It felt like instinct. "What do you like to read?" Mara asked quietly, her voice just for Lily. Lily's face lit up, a switch flipping inside her. "Daddy reads to me every single night." Mara glanced up at Daniel, just for a second, and a warmth flickered in her expression before she turned back. "What are you reading now?" Lily leaned in conspiratorially. "A Girl Who Talks to Trees," she said. "And the trees talk back." Mara smiled again. "Sounds like the trees are lucky." Lily thought about this for a moment, then nodded with conviction. "They are." Right then, Daniel felt something unfold quietly inside him. It wasn't excitement and it wasn't fear. It was hope. A small, fragile thing, but it was there. Mara wasn't trying to impress Lily. She wasn't putting on a show of exaggerated friendliness or talking down to her. She was just listening, really listening. She asked questions and she waited for the answers. That mattered more than anything else. They ended up walking for much longer than they'd planned, the afternoon air cooling gently around them. Lily chattered on about school, about her art class, about a fascinating fact she'd learned: how whales sleep with only half their brain awake at a time. Mara listened as if each detail was a crucial piece of information. When Lily started to get tired, her steps slowing, Mara instinctively slowed with her without any comment. It allowed Daniel to scoop her up into his arms. No assumptions, no reaching, just a quiet, shared understanding. In the weeks that followed, Mara began to appear in Daniel's life the way sunlight does in the morning, gradually, Gently, without any grand announcement, she just was. She came to Lily's school play and sat right beside Daniel in the squeaky auditorium chair. Her hands were folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the stage, attentive. When Lily, dressed as a tree, spotted them in the audience, Mara clapped enthusiastically, her face lighting up as Lily beamed back at them. She started helping with homework at the kitchen table, her presence patient and steady. She never gave the answers, but guided Lily toward finding them herself. She stayed for dinners, cooking simple meals with a quiet efficiency that was comforting. Nothing fancy, nothing forced. It was just food, shared together, and with her came laughter. It returned to the house like an old friend who had been waiting politely on the doorstep for a long, long time. Daniel noticed the shift not in big, dramatic moments, but in the small, quiet ones. The way Lily would automatically set an extra fork on the table without being asked. The way Daniel realized he stopped bracing himself for an empty house when he unlocked the door at night. The way the silence in the evenings no longer felt so heavy, so loud. One evening, rain was tapping a soft, steady rhythm against the windows. They were all in the living room. Lily was curled up on the couch between them, a picture book forgotten in her lap. Her head was resting on Mara's shoulder, and Daniel watched as her breathing slowed, then deepened into the steady cadence of sleep. "She's asleep," he whispered, starting to rise from his chair. "I know," Mara whispered back, her voice barely a breath. He reached down to lift Lily, to carry her to bed, careful not to wake her. But Mara shook her head, just a gentle, slight movement. "Let her be," she mouthed. Daniel paused, his hands hovering in the air for a moment. Then he lowered them and sat back down slowly. He just watched his daughter sleep, so safe and unguarded, her small body relaxed completely against Mara. Mara didn't move a muscle, except to adjust just enough to better support Lily's weight. Her presence was a steady, solid warmth in the dim light of the room. And in that moment, in the quiet of the rainy evening, Daniel realized how deeply he was already hoping. He wasn't hoping for something dramatic or earth-shattering. He was hoping for something lasting. He was hoping for mornings that didn't feel so heavy, for evenings that didn't always end in silence. He was hoping for a life where love could exist alongside memory, not in competition with it. A life where new joy didn't erase the old, but simply added a new layer. He didn't say any of it out loud. He didn't need to. He had a feeling Mara felt it anyway. Outside, the steady rain softened into a fine mist. And inside, the house seemed to breathe quietly around them, filled with a feeling Daniel hadn't known in a very long time. It was the feeling of belonging. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this story, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel for more. We'll see you next time. The house was quiet, with that special stillness only nighttime can manage. Lily had fallen asleep hours ago, tucked in with her book resting open beside her, as if she'd drifted off mid-thought. Daniel had stood in her doorway, watching her sleep, letting the peace settle into him before quietly closing the door. Now, he and Mara sat at the kitchen table, steam rising gently from their mugs. The overhead light was intentionally dim. Outside, the neighborhood was asleep. Inside, the house seemed to hold its breath. This was the time for questions. Daniel wrapped his hands around his mug, not drinking yet, just staring at a faint ring left on the table. He'd rehearsed this in his head, but the words still felt fragile, like they could break. "Can I ask you something?" he said finally. Mara looked up from her tea. "Always," he took a breath. "Does it bother you?" He hesitated, then pushed forward. "When people stare?" The question hung between them, honest and unguarded. Mara didn't answer right away. She leaned back, considering it. Not because she was offended, but because the question deserved care. "Sometimes," she said at last. "Mostly when they decide who I am without asking," Daniel nodded slowly. "I don't want to do that." "You don't," she said softly. "You ask?" Something loosened in his chest. He hadn't realized how tightly he'd been holding on to that concern. Mara traced the rim of her mug with her finger. "When I was a kid," she continued, "people meant well. Teachers, strangers, even family. But everything came with assumptions, that I'd be fragile or angry. Or inspirational," she smiled faintly. "I was just a kid trying to get to class." Daniel listened, the way he always did, with his full attention, without interrupting. The world isn't built for bodies like mine, she said calmly. So, you learn early how to adapt, how to move, how to ask for help without apologizing for existing. Daniel thought about Lily, about her future. He thought about how fiercely he wanted the world to be kinder than it had been. And you? Mara asked gently. What does grief look like for you now? The question surprised him, not because it was intrusive, but because it was so precise. Daniel exhaled slowly. It arrives when I least expect it, he said. In small moments, a smell, a sound. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it knocks the air out of me. He paused, searching for the right words. It doesn't hurt the way it used to, but it lingers. Like it's reminding me that love leaves a mark. Mara nodded. It should. He looked up at her, grateful. I worried, he admitted, that moving forward meant leaving something behind. It doesn't, she said gently. It means carrying it differently. They sat in a silence that wasn't empty, but full. The kind of quiet that felt earned. Daniel noticed the details, as he always did. The way Mara sat comfortably, grounded in herself. The way her presence didn't demand reassurance. The way she allowed space without withdrawing. I don't want to be careful with you, he said suddenly. I want to be respectful. But not distant, Mara smiled. I don't need you to tiptoe. I need you to be honest. I can do that, he said. I know. They didn't reach across the table. They didn't rush the moment. They just let it exist as it was. Outside, a car passed slowly. Somewhere down the street, a door closed. Life continued, indifferent and steady. Daniel realized then that they weren't trying to fix each other. They were learning how to ask instead of assume. Learning how to sit with discomfort instead of smoothing it over. Learning that intimacy isn't built through perfection but through attention. When they finally stood to clear the table, Daniel felt lighter, not because the weight was gone, but because it had been shared. As they turned off the kitchen light, Mara glanced toward Lily's room, her expression thoughtful, protective. You're doing a good job, she said quietly. Daniel swallowed. I'm trying, that's enough, she replied. They moved through the house without a sound, each step careful but unafraid. And for the first time in a long while, Daniel understood something clearly. The most important questions weren't the loud ones. They were the ones asked softly, in the safety of a shared table, after the world had gone quiet. Thank you for being here for this quiet moment with Daniel and Mara. If their story resonates with you, consider subscribing and joining our community. We have more stories to share, and we'd love for you to be a part of them. Until next time. The rain returned the way it always did, without announcement, without apology. Daniel noticed it first in the reflections on the pavement as he and Mara walked toward the cafe. The city looked softened, rinsed clean of sharp edges. Raindrops clung to Mara's jacket, darkening the fabric just as they had the first day they met. Funny how it's always raining when we come here, Mara said lightly. Daniel smiled. Maybe the place insists on it. They stepped inside, and the familiar scent wrapped around them immediately burnt espresso and damp wool, warmth layered over memory. The cafe hadn't changed. Fogged windows, warm lighting. The quiet hum of conversations threading together into something almost musical. Same window, same smell, same small round table. It was empty, waiting. Daniel felt a flicker of recognition, like greeting an old friend. He pulled out the chair for Mara without thinking, not as a performance, but as habit, as care. She settled in smoothly, placing her crutch beside the table, exactly where it wouldn't be in the way. This is where you said yes, Mara said, her voice soft with something like wonder. Daniel followed her gaze to the empty chair across from him, the one that had once separated him from the world. Best decision I ever made, he replied. She reached across the table and took his hand. Her grip was steady, warm, familiar. Daniel closed his fingers around hers, grounding himself in the present. The cafe buzzed around them. A couple laughed near the counter. Someone argued gently over which pastry to share. The espresso machine hissed, tireless as ever. And yet at their table, everything felt still. Daniel thought about the man he'd been the first time he sat there, shoulders hunched, eyes tired, heart guarded. He remembered how heavy that day had felt, how carefully he'd arranged himself in the world, as if taking up less space might make things easier. He hadn't known then that life was about to ask him a simple question. He looked at Mara now, at the calm certainty she carried with her, at the way she existed without apology. He thought about Lily, about the way her laughter filled rooms again, about how she'd begun setting out 3 mugs in the morning without being asked. "Do you ever think about how close we were to missing this?" he asked quietly. Mara tilted her head. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but I don't dwell on it." "No?" She shook her head. "You said yes?" "That's the part that matters." He smiled, tightening his grip on her hand just slightly. They ordered their drinks, coffee for him, chamomile tea for her. The barista recognized them now, offering a nod that felt almost conspiratorial. Daniel wondered how many lives brushed past each other in this space, how many stories began quietly at shared tables. As they waited, Mara leaned back, observing the cafe with the same thoughtful gaze she'd always had. "This place hasn't changed," she said. "Neither have we," Daniel replied, then paused. "I mean, we have, but not in the ways that erase who we were," Mara smiled. "Growth doesn't mean replacement?" He nodded, remembering her words at the kitchen table. "Carrying, not leaving?" Their drinks arrived, steam rising between them like something alive. Daniel took a careful sip this time, smiling when Mara noticed. "Learned your lesson?" she teased gently. "Eventually," he said. "I'm a slow study." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching rain bead and slide down the window. Daniel felt a deep sense of gratitude, not the overwhelming kind that made him afraid, but the steady kind that anchored him. "Lily asked about you this morning," he said casually. "Oh?" Mara's expression softened immediately. "She wanted to know if you'd be coming over for dinner tonight." Mara's smile was small but unmistakable. "And?" "I told her yes," he said. "Of course." The word lingered between them. Yes, it no longer felt fragile. It felt strong, chosen. Mara squeezed his hand once more, then released it to reach for her cup. Daniel watched the movement, the ease, the quiet competence. He loved her not in spite of anything, but because of everything she was. As the rain continued outside, Daniel understood something clearly. The table hadn't changed. He had. What once felt like a place of waiting had become a place of return. What once marked solitude now marked connection. They finished their drink slowly, unhurried. There was no rush. The world would wait. When they finally stood to leave, Daniel glanced back once more at the small round table by the window. It would hold other stories, other questions. But this one, this yes, was theirs. Thank you so much for listening. If this story touched you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more content. It means the world to us. See you in the next one. "Can I share this table?" That's what she'd asked. The sound of her voice still lingered in Daniel's memory, not the exact tone, but the feeling it carried, calm, unassuming, brave in its simplicity. He remembered how little he'd understood the weight of that moment, how easily he'd answered without knowing what he was opening himself up to. Yes. At the time it had felt like nothing more than politeness, courtesy, a small kindness offered on a tired afternoon. Now he knew better. Yes had led to mornings where sunlight filtered through the kitchen window while Lily argued with Mara about whether cereal was soup. It had led to mismatched socks tossed into the laundry basket, to school projects spread across the dining table, to laughter that came slowly at first, and then all at once. Yes had not arrived with fireworks. It had arrived quietly and stayed. Daniel stood at the sink now, rinsing mugs while Mara helped Lily pack her backpack for the next day. He watched them from the corner of his eye, the way Lily leaned into Mara without thinking, the way Mara listened with her full attention as Lily explained something only half related to school. The house felt lived in again, not crowded. Not loud, alive. Later that evening, after Lily was asleep, Daniel and Mara sat on the couch. The television was muted, and the room was softly lit by a single lamp in the corner. Mara's feet were tucked beneath her posture relaxed and grounded. Daniel rested his arm along the back of the couch, not touching, but close enough to feel her presence. "I was thinking about that day," he said quietly. Mara glanced at him. "Which day?" "The cafe," he replied. "The first one," she smiled faintly. "You looked exhausted," he laughed softly. "I was. You still said yes." "I didn't know what I was saying yes to," he admitted. "No one ever does," she said. "That's the point." Daniel considered that. He thought about how carefully he'd lived since losing Lily's mother. How he'd measured every choice, weighed every risk, kept his world small enough to manage. He believed that safety lived in limitation, but safety, he was learning, lived in honesty. In presence. In choosing to engage even when the outcome wasn't guaranteed. I was afraid, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, of hoping. Mara nodded. Me too. He looked at her then, really looked. At the quiet strength she carried. At the way she existed fully as herself, never asking for permission, never demanding space, but always deserving it. I don't feel afraid anymore, he said. She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. Neither do I, the word yes echoed through his thoughts, not as a single moment but as a series of choices. Yes to listening instead of assuming. Yes to asking instead of deciding for someone else. Yes to a love that didn't erase the past but honored it. The next morning, Lily padded into the kitchen in mismatched socks, her hair sticking up in defiance of gravity. Is Mara coming today? She asked, opening the fridge. Yes, Daniel said easily. She is, Lily grinned. Good. Daniel watched her pour cereal, spill some milk, and shrug it off. He remembered the quiet mornings that used to greet him, how heavy they'd been, how careful he'd felt just existing inside them. Now, mornings were imperfect and full. Later that day, as Daniel and Mara walked together, rain threatening but not yet falling, he realized something else. Yes had changed him, not into someone louder, not into someone braver in obvious ways. It had changed him into someone willing to be seen, willing to risk joy, willing to pull out a chair and make room for someone new. Do you regret it? Mara asked suddenly, glancing at him with curiosity. Regret what? Asking to share your table, she said, her tone light but her eyes searching. Daniel stopped walking and turned toward her fully. No, he said without a single hesitation. I regret every no I said before that, she smiled, not wide, not dramatic, just real. As they continued walking, Daniel understood something he wished he could tell his past self. Life doesn't change through grand promises or perfect timing. It changes through moments that ask very little but offer everything. A chair pulled out, a question asked, a door quietly opened, and the courage to say yes. Not once, but again and again. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about the small moments that change our lives. See you next time.